I feel like that's so powerful because, you go from I didn't know what I didn't know. And now I know. And now I'm aware, but I don't do the tools. And then eventually you're aware and you use the tools more than you don't. And then the final step of that is now you just are.
You're listening to Get Your Marriage On, the fun and spicy podcast bringing you new tools and fresh ideas so that you can be the sexiest couple you know.
Holy smokes, this episode is jam-packed with so much goodness and truth bombs. You're about to hear Tony and I get a bit vulnerable as we share some of our mistakes and lessons learned about growing more emotionally mature in our own relationships. And I bet there's a lot in here that you'd be able to relate to too. Have you ever accused your spouse of being a narcissist? Or at least, them being a little myopic or only seeing their side of things without taking you into account? Well, if so, this episode is for you. And you might want to ask your spouse to listen to this one too. And if you've ever desired a stronger emotional connection with your spouse, this one is for you too. Tony Overbay is a genius and a licensed marriage family therapist from the Bay Area of California. And he's the host of the popular podcast called The Virtual Couch. In his practice, working with thousands of couples, he's noticed how crucial emotional maturity is and how narcissism, and I put that in air quotes, which he explains as emotional immaturity, plays a role in the way we relate to ourselves and others. He goes on to explain how we wake up to it and the steps we can take to be stronger within ourselves and our relationships. Now, before we begin, I want to let you know that if you're interested in working with me to bring the intimacy in your marriage to the next level, I'm opening the doors to my program at the end of this month. It's super affordable and designed for busy couples on the go that want a better intimate relationship. This program includes coaching opportunities, a private members-only podcast, courses on sex and intimacy, access to the Next Level app, and every workshop we've ever done and will do, such as the upcoming one at the end of this month about how to have an orgasm or better orgasms. It's a no-brainer. Give it a try just for a month. You can find more information and sign up at getyourmarriageon.com, click on coaching, and then click on Next Level. All right, now on to our interview. Tony, welcome to the Get Your Marriage On podcast. It's great to have you here.
I am excited. Fellow marathon runner, enthusiastic guy. I mean,
yes.
let's do this.
Yes. So you're a therapist. You've been a therapist for a long time. You've worked with like 1,300 couples.
Yeah, at least 1,300. Yeah.
That's amazing. Have you ever had a time when you're the therapist coaching a couple and then realize the advice you're giving them is something you need to work on yourself?
Okay. Other than every day, Dan, it's funny. There's a cliche in the therapy world where you get into therapy basically to work on yourself. And I thought, nah, not me. This is a calling. Like this is a passion I have. And it was a few years in where I realized, oh, this is all about me, trying to figure out my own stuff. So with that note, I've seen hundreds of couples at this point. I think there's more guy therapists now, but this was 15 years ago and there weren't as many guy therapists. So a guy would come in, I'm doing couples therapy and he would look at me and we'd be talking about sexuality, intimacy, that sort of thing. And he would say, it's kind of like this, when we're happy, I think nothing caps off a celebration like sex or if we're sad, what can really pick me up is sex. And then I feel like he, in essence, he would say, and if I really am feeling off or sick, I mean, you can always use NyQuil or drugs but it's nothing like an orgasm or sex. Like that really does it. And then he'll look at me like, so can you let her know that I'm not crazy, that this makes perfect sense? And at this point, when I had my kind of aha moment, I realized, I've heard this one a lot. So I turn to the wife and I say, so what are you hearing? And, she's just looking frustrated. And she says, I'm in charge of his happiness. I mean, completely. So now all of a sudden, if he's not happy, it's because of me. I didn't have enough sex with him, or we didn't celebrate with sex. I didn't pull him out of his sadness with sex. I didn't get him out of his cold with sex. I didn't heal him. And so then I would have this moment where I would say, okay, so here's what we got to do. We really have to reestablish your relationship with sex and intimacy. I can think of so many examples of this. I mean, I can think of one where it was this amazing couple. They look like they have everything together. And the wife would say, I won't even make eye contact with him while we're brushing our teeth, because if I do, all of a sudden he's like, oh, tonight, huh? Like we're going to have sex. And then I would start noticing that, okay, now all of a sudden the guy just says, okay, she doesn't even do like a full body hug or an open mouth kiss, or, if she's laying in my lap, she doesn't really want to do anything more than just kind of fall asleep. And And so it just, the guy almost feels like she doesn't realize all these opportunities we have. And it's like, oh, she does. Matter of fact, that's almost like all she's aware of is that. And so she starts to feel, like that's my only purpose. And so then I would say to the guy often in that scenario, okay, we got this amazing opportunity to reestablish the relationship with sex. So what would it look like if she knew that for a little while, and I'm not like necessarily saying I'm a fan of the sex fasts or those sort of things, but let's just say that we gave it a couple of weeks where it's okay, he can lay in your lap. And if you end up becoming excited, it doesn't, no sex. Like we're going to just play or, foreplay, or now you will get the full body hug or you will get the open mouth kiss. And then I feel like, the guy would then look at me and say, oh, I gotcha. Okay. So I do that for a couple of weeks and then we're going to have tons more sex.
It's
right.
Like, no,
right. And I'm like, no. We're reestablishing the relationship with intimacy. So there can be more of that play and that exploration and that sort of thing. So, so it was funny. So then I go home and I remember very specifically the time when I said to my wife, I was saying, can you believe that? Like guys, huh? How about them? And she just said, oh, you totally do that, and I said, how dare you? What are you talking about? And then she had let me know that like what I would do is I would be really nice for a couple of days all of a sudden. And I felt like it made perfect sense. I'm going to help bathe the kids and get them all ready and we'll read them the book and we'll do all that sort of thing. So that then, okay, here we go. Then if something did happen, then the next 2 or 3 days, I'm good. So I'm not bathing the kids again and reading the books and all that kind of stuff. I mean, I'm still nice. She said it wasn't like I'm there kicking the dog or, yelling around the house or whatever. But I never realized that, it was I'm going to pay particular attention and be really kind and nice and show you,
Yeah,
the doggone so that, Dan, that thing. And so then I think that what was funny and boy, talk about emotional immaturity, even when I felt like I had my realization or aha moment, then I found myself, even let's say it's the day after there had been intimacy or something. And now I'm like, hey, I think you look amazing today. And I'm not even trying to have sex with you. And then after, who knows how many months of that, at one point she said, but you still are, and then I was like, no, okay. No, I guess I am. Yeah. I feel like that's that part where as I'm working with couples and clients so often, and I would start to see these patterns emerge and people have these conversations where if I'm doing my own self-confrontation, I would realize, oh, I'm totally doing that, or I would find that I would come home and I would tell my wife stories of the day, of course, leaving out names, that sort of thing. But it's like, man, can you believe that? This one guy, he's super cool and nice and he does all these things and his wife doesn't want to have sex with him all the time. Like, that's crazy, right? Realizing that, oh, I'm being so manipulative, with the things that I'm saying. And so I think that one's one of those that's it's pretty wild where you see these patterns play out. And then it is that opportunity as a therapist for self-confrontation. And none of us like to sit with that discomfort. And so I think that can be really difficult. But I have a thing I say so often, Dan, of that we really we don't know what we don't know. And so once we kind of realize that, okay, I obviously don't know everything, that opens me up to be more available to take on new data and then really look at that data and say, is this something I'm doing?
So some of our listeners may never heard the term self-confront before.
Yeah.
Let's talk about what self-confronting is real quick.
Yeah. So can I go all the way back to the womb? Is that okay, Dan?
Sure.
Okay.
Back to the womb.
Back to the womb. So I really feel like this is important and I'll try to go through this as quickly as I can. But I really feel like if you kind of look at from the womb, we are these little babies, pink squishy babies that we express ourselves and our needs are met instantly. You cry and everybody's there. They're going to wipe your backside. They're going to feed you. They're going to tickle you. And it's amazing. And so then for the first 1 or 2 years of our life, I mean, I just like pointing that out because we're wired genetically to then express ourselves and people come meet our needs, period. And so then you get 3, 4, 5. And now I say, okay, now welcome to the world of abandonment. So we've got these attachment wounds and abandonment wounds. So attachment is like, I have to interact. I have to have somebody that sees me or else I may not matter or exist or nobody will care. And then I may just cease to exist. So how am I going to be seen? And now it comes over to my fear of abandonment. So now all of a sudden it's like, okay, I got to figure out whatever way I can to get people to recognize me and notice me. But now all of a sudden I'm 4, 5, 6 years old and I say, hey, I'd like a pony for my birthday, please. And we live in an apartment and my parents give me the pony. Well, I always say every little kid is basically a little egotistical narcissist who only thinks of themselves and doesn't have a view of what the rest of people are going through. So if my parents didn't give me a pony, it's because they hate me. It's because they don't care for me, right? It's not because that's ridiculous. We live in an apartment and ponies are expensive and there's nowhere to raise the pony. So then so all of a sudden it's like this welcome to the world of abandonment, and to our kid brain, we're so used to, but I asked for one, I mean, I'm wired that if I say I would like this, please, then you're supposed to then give it to me. And if you don't give it to me, that must be because something's wrong with me. And then I feel like, okay, so now we go into, our adolescence, teenage years, dating life, and we've got this abandonment and attachment wounds that are competing. So it's like, okay, I have to get somebody to care about me or recognize me, or I may die. And how to do that, I got to do it in whatever way I can. Do I become the funny guy? Do I become the star athlete? Do I become the recluse who I want somebody to come rescue me? And so then,
do I dress in a certain way to get attention?
Totally. Right? Yeah. And that's so normal. So then I say, and this is where I promise this is going to make sense. But so then I say, okay, so we all then end up in our relationships kind of enmeshed and codependent. Because, and this is where I say that, man, when you're dating somebody, they may say, hey, do you like Jane Austen movies? And if you think to yourself, I don't really know what they are, but I like her. So it's like, yeah, dig them. Because I'm sure I would like them because I like her. But then if she even says, what's your favorite one? And then it's like, man, I like them all. I can't even pick. It's like, I'm not willing to admit that I don't know what they are because I mean, that sounds silly. I want her to like me. And then I feel like sometimes she's doing the same thing where, okay, that answer seems a little off, but I got to give him the benefit of the doubt because I don't want to come off as rude. So now all of a sudden we get married and we feel like we're clicking. Like, hey, we love everything. Everything's great. It's all the same. And even if subconsciously we're saying, yeah, I'm sure down the road, I'll figure it out. I'll watch some Jane Austen. I'm sure it'll be fine. But so that's where I'd like to start with, okay, in codependent and enmeshed, got my hands together here. So then slowly we go through life and we start having experiences. We get out of school, we have kids, we have jobs and loss, we deal with financial issues. So now all of a sudden we start having our own opinions. And now all of a sudden we realize we are two different people. We actually have different experiences. But when we're in this enmeshment codependency, all of a sudden when we start to express our opinion, all of a sudden here comes that fear of abandonment. Oh my gosh, this person, if they have a different opinion, they may leave,
Right.
Or if I express my real true self, they may go, they may not like that. So then we keep pulling ourselves back into this enmeshment. So before we get to self-confrontation, I like to talk about differentiation is now with my hands are where one person ends and the other begins. So we can become interdependent and differentiated. Now we're two different people. But then I like to say, boy, when you first get to that place, this middle is nothing but invalidation. Because all of a sudden I'm expressing my opinion and the other person is saying, oh man, I did not know that. Really? You've never told me that before. And that's where it's so easy for us to go, yeah, I don't know. Maybe I really don't mean that either. Because it's scary to kind of put ourselves out there, especially if we're dealing with that invalidation. So that's a whole bunch of groundwork, right? To say that, okay, what I love is that if I can get a couple to have the tools to be able to now recognize we're two different people, now my partner can express their opinion. And now I can look at that and I can say, okay, now that I realize it's okay for me to be me and it's okay for her to be her. And I'm aware that it's scary because that's my childhood abandonment and attachment wounds. They're just trying to protect me. And so it does feel like I may lose this person if they really find out who I am, because a lot of times then at that point, I've never really even realized, well, who am I? Because I've been trying to be this other person so that this person will like me and so they want to have sex with me. And so I feel like so often, we put out this version of ourselves and we say, hey, this is who I am, right? Do you see this version of me? So validate this, and if all of a sudden they're like, I don't know if that's who I see, that's where we get to do the, how dare you, like the situation with my wife, right? Where I'm saying, I wouldn't do that, right? See me out here, like I'm the nicest guy I'm nice to my kids all the time. And I treat you like great. And she's like, do you, and if I realize all of a sudden, oh, that's scary. It's invalidation. But then that differentiation is where now I can take that and go, okay, self-confrontation. Now I need to take a look. Is what she's saying? I mean, this is the person I'm with the majority of the time. I love her. And so is what she's saying, is there any truth in that? And that's where I love, there's two things that happen though. One is when we're in our emotional immature state, we'll just go straight up victimhood and say, okay, I guess you're right. Yeah, I'm a horrible person. I might, give me the dog, I'll kick it. You're right. And in that scenario, we want them to come rescue us and say, oh no, you're great. But that's where I feel like that, okay, I'll take a look at that. And in that moment, it felt uncomfortable. I had immediate thoughts of, oh my gosh, this is it. She's going to leave me because of this one sentence she's saying. And so that's uncomfortable. But then once I sat with it, that discomfort, then I was able to self-confront and say, man, I totally can see that.
Mhm.
Yeah, I do. I'm the world's greatest guy leading up to being intimate. And then it's not that I'm a jerk, but now I kind of I'm off to do my thing.
Uh-huh.
And so then I really appreciated that there was that self-confrontation. And Dan, what I think is kind of cool is then being also able to then say, let's say that I was pretty confident, like let's say healthy ego, that man, I don't really feel that that's the way I'm showing up, because if
Mhm.
I knew that, okay, but actually the next 4 or 5 days, I still watched the kids and read them the books. This is where it leads into my job isn't to say you're wrong, but it's like, man, I appreciate you sharing that. And I'll take a look at that and self-confront. But then if I feel like from a healthy ego that based off of my real life experience, that isn't the case, now I have
Uh-huh.
to have those tools to be able to express that. So I know that was a 10-minute answer of self-confrontation and we went all the way back to the womb, but I don't know. Tell me if that kind of made sense.
No, that makes sense. There was a time recently in my own marriage where we had a little disagreement about something. And my initial reaction is to like, how come
Yeah.
you just can't get this right? But
Yes.
I bit my tongue, thank goodness. And I thought, what's my role in this? How am I
Yeah.
contributing to this? What am I missing here? I hate taking myself on.
Yeah.
It's so
Absolutely. It's 'cause it's
uncomfortable
uncomfortable.
because it's
It's
so
so
much
uncomfortable.
easier to blame the problem on someone else, right?
Yes. Yes.
But when I could like take deep breaths and really calm myself down enough to really examine like, what is my role here? How am I contributing
Yeah.
to this? And then I could see what I was doing. Now, I wasn't all to blame, but I had a role to play in it.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then later on, I could say, hey, you probably don't know this, but I was pretty upset with you earlier today. But I had a role to play in this. And I was taking myself on in front of my wife, I guess.
Yeah.
Instead of,
How did
and it didn't
and
turn
how
into
did
like
that
a
go?
blaming session, and it didn't turn into
Yeah.
like this at all. It was more like confessing my sins in front of my wife. Kind of an experience, right?
Yeah.
In the
Yeah.
moment where it would have been so easy for me to justify my anger or whatever based on something I thought she
Yeah.
was doing or not doing.
Well, and Dan,
But
can I mention something?
yeah,
You just like,
uh-huh,
and I hope it's okay to do a couple tangents, but I appreciate when you just said it's like confessing my sins. Cause I do
uh-huh,
feel like I've been thinking about this one a lot lately too. I feel like there's even two versions of like the concepts around confession. And I feel like there's
yeah,
a confession to say that, hey,
appease
I'm
somebody.
aware. And
Uh-huh,
there's the one to appease. And I've even
uh-huh,
thought about when the clients I work with that have more of a religious background, and I work with a lot around addiction or turning to unhealthy coping mechanisms. And so a
mhm,
lot of times I feel like I run into people that because it makes them feel uncomfortable that they got caught or they have to go, meet with somebody to talk with this, whatever they're doing, that the
mhm.
confession is almost this need for an external validation to say that you're okay. But I do feel like that's a bit more of an unhealthy version of that because it's
It's
saying, okay,
perfunctory.
yeah, it's like, okay, I'm
Uh-huh,
saying to you, am I okay? And if you say you are okay, then I feel a relief, but I haven't really confronted the behavior. And then if I
mhm,
say, am I okay? And that person says, you are not okay. Then I say, how dare you? I think I'll
uh-huh,
go do more of this behavior. I will
uh-huh,
show you.
uh-huh,
And so that's where I feel like that when I work with people that struggle with unhealthy coping mechanisms like porn or food or their phone or gambling, that really it's more of it's some internal work to know that let's start the whole concept of no, you're okay, but you just turn to these things when you feel less than in your marriage or your parenting, your health, your career, your faith, that sort of thing. So I know that's a whole different tangent, but when you said confession, that's one of those I've been kicking around lately, the different
yeah.
versions of confession.
Yeah, so the better confession is to really examine. Now,
Yeah.
are there people that just do not have this ability to self-confront? They're still in that toddler stage of brain or 5-year-old.
Yeah.
How come I didn't get a pony brain
Yeah.
as an
So
adult? What's that
So
like?
well, Dan, and it's funny because again, quick tangent. I have this virtual couch podcast. I've got 350 something episodes, and anytime I would talk about marriage therapy or parenting or the word narcissism, the downloads would go up by the thousands. And it wasn't like I was doing it just to get the downloads, because in my office I was starting to see a lot more of what would be defined as narcissistic traits or tendencies or narcissistic behavior. And this is where I don't know if it was 5, 6, 700 couples in where I could hand them tools. And I'm a big emotionally focused therapy EFT fan. And I've got my 4 pillars are based off of this evidence-based couples model that I think just really helps provide a framework to communicate. And let's say that, 60, 70% of the time, the couple would then, it was a clear, they didn't know what they didn't know. They'd never seen healthy relationships modeled by their parents. And so then you're handing them these tools. It's bumpy, but then they learn to communicate more effectively together and they ride off into the sunset, live happily ever after. Actually, it's not like that, but they have a tool. But then
but they overcome that challenge because
they
now
do.
they have the tools. They're able to learn it and take it.
And they drink it in like water because they desperately want their relationship to be better. But then there was a big chunk as well where this same tool was then all of a sudden being weaponized, or there was one person in the relationship that felt so entitled or so special that they were in essence saying, hey, screw your 4 pillars, old man. When you hear how bad she is, you'll join me. You'll scrap all of your tools and we can both tell her that she's wrong. And I felt like you would see that over and over again. It was so patternistic. So that's where I start looking at this concepts around, narcissism, narcissistic traits and tendencies. And I started talk about another area of self-confrontation as I started to recognize a lot of my own narcissistic traits and tendencies. And people would think, am I just saying that to, I don't know, as a figure of speech? And it was like, oh no, I mean, this is real for me, and that's where the real self-confrontation came in. So, a year and a half ago, I started a separate podcast called Waking Up to Narcissism. And I was so intentional about the name because it was waking up to the narcissism or the narcissistic traits and tendencies in your relationship with whether it's your spouse, your employer, your religious institution, your adult children, your in-laws, your boss, or more so waking up to your own narcissistic traits and tendencies in yourself. And then about 7-8 episodes in, I made a real intentional episode called Am I the Narcissist? And then I talked about how that word is thrown around so much.
Yes.
But real narcissistic traits and tendencies are real narcissistic personality disorder is 2 to 3% of the population. But then I reframed it and talked about emotional immaturity, and that I feel like we're all emotionally immature until we're not, And so kind of to go back to answer your question, I feel like that then becomes the big question of, is it something where it's just something that somebody doesn't know what they don't know because of what they were modeled or what they saw? Or is it something that somebody is, and I can sound very dramatic with this, but incapable of because of the level of the almost emotional or mental abuse that happened as a kid? I quote this author named Eleanor Greenberg a lot, where she says that narcissistic personality disorder is the name of a series of coping mechanisms that began as an adaptation to a childhood family situation that left the kid with unstable self-esteem. They can't regulate their self-esteem without external validation, and then low empathy. And so then they need somebody else to let them know if they're okay, not in a healthy way. And that does lead to lower empathy. There's a couple other things that are kind of nerdy psychology terms I dig. One of them is this whole object relations, where it's like, this is the capacity to see oneself and then other people in this stable and integrated way, and acknowledge that we all have good and bad qualities. And then there's a thing called object constancy, where it's the ability to maintain a positive connection with somebody that you like, even if you're angry or hurt or frustrated. And so the real emotional immature or narcissistic people, and this is where I think you can start to talk about self-confrontation, is, when I'm angry with somebody, can I still see that, but I care about them, I appreciate it. Or if I'm angry, then is it like burn the village down? They need to know how angry I am. Because without that whole object relation or object constancy, then people see themselves or others only one of two ways. It's like they are either unique and special, omnipotent, this high status, or they are defective and worthless and low status. So somebody struggling with narcissistic issues or tendencies or emotional immaturity, they can't hold on to this good opinion and good feelings about somebody if that person has offended them or slighted them. So all of a sudden that person goes from "you're the love of my life" to "I can't stand you."
You're the devil.
You're totally right. And so, and then emotionally mature or narcissistic people, then they seesaw back and forth with that. And so this is another area of self-confrontation, where there was a time where my wife let me know that, hey, when you come home, it's kind of like, okay, which Tony am I going to get? And I thought, are you kidding? Again, boy, that doesn't sound good. But the self-confrontation was, she was pretty spot on, where if I'm having this amazing day and I've helped all these people and I'm feeling good, then I come home and all of a sudden it's like, throwing cash around, making it rain. Let's go out to eat. Let's do this. Let's do that. And all of a sudden my kids are like, hey, this is great. But then if I had a bad day, or maybe I forgot to pay bills, or maybe I did something like that. And then I come home and I'm down, and now the kids are like,
stressed.
hey, Dad, and now they're, Dad, let's go out to eat. And all of a sudden I'm like, geez, guys, like you're spinning me out of house and home, and all of a sudden I wasn't as aware as I would hope that I would have been about oh, so then all of a sudden, here's what the narcissistic trait or tendency looks like is when I walk in, now my mood becomes the mood of the home. And that breaks my heart to think about those sort of things. So when it kind of goes back to that question of, that's where I feel like that's a 10-year-old walking around in adult clothing where, I'm either really angry or I'm really happy, and everybody else around me is going to be the same. And that's where I'll see like a guy, for an example, and it can be a wife that is more emotionally mature and narcissistic as well. But where if a guy just gets really angry and frustrated and really says some mean things, but then all of a sudden it's almost like he feels better, but now she's kind of left devastated. And then 10 minutes later, kind of going back to this object constancy or whole object relations, where then he says, 10 minutes later, now he's like, hey, what do you want to do for dinner? And the wife just feels like, I'm kind of devastated. And then what does he do often? Because he doesn't like to sit with that discomfort.
Right.
Look, I said, I'm sorry. Now it's on you. Like I'm saying I'm good, so why aren't you? And I feel like that's more of that emotional immaturity or not able to sit with, uncomfortable emotions or self-confront. So I don't know if that even answers the question, Dan. I don't know.
That's good. So this is a quality that's often a lot easier to see in other people than yourself.
Totally. Yeah.
I don't know why that is, but that's the way humans are.
Well, I think it's because we're wired. I mean, the whole concept like gaslighting is a childhood defense mechanism, and we don't want to get in trouble. We don't like to feel bad. And so if we weren't modeled people taking ownership of things as a kid, I mean, and I often think about examples like where I had a woman that came and picked up her teenage daughter a couple hours late at school. And the woman went in, I was talking with the teenage daughter, and she just said, yeah, my mom came in and she's like, hey, before you don't even start with me. Like, you don't even know the day that I've had. So she just told this daughter, who waited 2 hours, was embarrassed, didn't hear from mom.
Scared.
Then went, scared. Yeah. And so then it's like, instead of expressing your emotions, you just watch somebody tell you your feelings don't matter and mine take center stage, and then we're not going to talk about it. So I mean, that if that's the model, then suddenly grow up and I'm like, oh, my feelings don't matter. I need to stop them. And then we need to get rid of this discomfort right away. Hey, don't even start with me vibe.
Yeah.
And right. And so I feel like that concept around gaslighting as a childhood defense mechanism is if a person's been from early on, that's just the way that their brain works. That's what it feels like to be them, is the second there's discomfort, then I'm going to reject it and push it away. Then I love what you're saying.
Pretend it's not there. Yeah.
Yeah. And I feel like then there's a concept from this book, The Buddha Brain, that I think is amazing, where it talks about what it feels like to be you, or your implicit memory. The author, Rick Hansen, he says that much as your body is built from the food you eat, your mind is built from the experiences you have. And then this flow of experience gradually sculpts your brain, shaping your mind. And so that's called implicit memory. And it includes your expectations, your models of relationships, your emotional outlook, your tendencies. So that implicit memory establishes the interior landscape of your mind, or what it feels like to be you. And here's the key, that it's based on the slow accumulating residue of lived experience. So if somebody has been living this experience where they have been invalidated, they've not seen people take ownership of things, and they've seen it's not my fault, then what it feels like to be them from childhood is it is not my fault, and that becomes their implicit memory. And so then that's the part where you start to recognize, okay, is the person, and it sounds so dramatic, but is the person capable of self-confrontation? Or
yes.
or is it the air they breathe? Is that, they just gaslight because they are not going to sit with discomfort. And that's when you start to see the patterns that are showing an extreme emotional immaturity, that it literally is never that person's fault. And if you try to confront them, they're not willing to take a look at that and self-confront, and I think that can be really difficult.
What do you do if you're married to such a person?
So there's $1 million question. So, and man, these are, Dan, I thank you. Like, I dig talking about this stuff. So back to the Waking Up to Narcissism podcast, I really believe the reason I started that was, and I have this thing I probably say too often, but when people start to recognize those patterns or traits in their marriage, and if they get on Google or they start, they hear somebody talk about narcissism or something.
Or they read the DSM-5 and read the criteria.
Yeah. Well, and okay, it's funny you bring that up too. Like the DSM-5 criteria is more toward that malicious, malignant narcissist. So that's one of the things where I feel like if you look at it from an extreme emotional immaturity scale, then it almost resonates more, because sometimes people will say, well, he's not malicious. He's not, malignant. So it must be me. He must not be a narcissist. And that's where I feel like, okay, well, he hit 4 out of the 5 diagnostic criteria. So That doesn't mean, whoo, good, but that's it, right. But I feel like that emotional immaturity, because I think I'm probably hitting on 4.5 of those. So when people find themselves thinking that might be the situation they're in, I have 5 rules that I stick to these. The first one is, I call it raising your emotional baseline, which is self-care. So if you're dealing with all the things coming at you are coming at you every day, whether you're feeling good about it or not. And if your baseline of emotions is low, I feel like you can't even sometimes reach the tools you need to survive. And so self-care, and it can be as simple as starting to dream or go on walks or pet a dog or read a book you like, or and it doesn't have to be grandiose, but we'll start to bump your emotional baseline up ever so slightly. And at some point you're going to hit a level where you can reach the tool you need to be able to be mindful or in the moment or take action. But a lot of times people feel so flat, and hopeless that they feel like they can't even reach the tools that they need to help. And so raise your baseline. And the second thing I say is get your PhD in gaslighting. I mean, because it's the world that I work in, I feel like, everybody knows about it, but gaslighting is when you may know that you really are confident about something that you've seen or observed or expressed. And then by the time you're done in a conversation, you feel crazy. You feel like, I don't even know what happened there. All of a
You're
sudden,
second guessing yourself, or someone else is second guessing you about the
and I
facts
think
that you had.
totally. And I think what's so hard about that, Dan, is when somebody has started to feel confident in this healthy ego. Maybe I'll talk about that in a second. And they know the things they know, and they know the things they don't know. Then when somebody is trying to make them feel crazy, they don't second guess themselves, because they know they're aware of, oh man, this is gaslighting. This is an unproductive conversation. So, raise baseline, get your PhD in gaslighting. And then my third thing is, I say, get out of unproductive conversations, because that's where the crazy making starts. And then when you're in the middle of it, you're all of a sudden your amygdala starts to just, kind of get hijacked, and your cortisol is flowing. You can't even access the part of your brain that is logic.
Right.
So, right. When your heart rate elevates and that cortisol is flowing, your brain shuts down your frontal lobes, because, it thinks you're in fight with a saber-toothed tiger, and you don't need your negotiation skills. You got to punch or you got to hide, and so the emotional immature person is going to kind of push all those buttons. It's part of what that gaslighting is, to get you amygdala hijacked. So now you start screaming. Now they get to go, geez, look at you, and now we never have to deal with whatever the issue is we were talking about. So now that fourth thing is, I say, then set healthy boundaries, and know that when you're dealing with a narcissist or emotionally immature person, a boundary is just a challenge. I mean, it's not like you're going to say, hey, if you talk this way, then I'm going to leave. That is a healthy boundary, but that person isn't going to go, oh, okay, I will never do that again. Oh no, when you're in the thick of it now they're going to use and push that button. Oh, you're going to leave? What am I talking to mean? That kind of thing. But the biggest one is, the fifth thing is, I say, realize that you'll never be the one that will cause them to have that aha moment or epiphany. I mean, that has to come from them.
From within. Yes.
And I feel like that's the part, Dan, where the person that really can even feel like, look, I'm the one trying to make this relationship better, is that I'm the one that continues to say, listen to this podcast or read this book, or, I was watching this thing, or I think, or I feel, or, and those are good things in a healthy relationship. But if those are landing flat, that is you trying to get that other person to change their, and it's not the healthy version of, hey, tell me your thoughts about this book or this podcast. That person's going to then use that against you. So if somebody finds themselves in one of these emotionally immature relationships, and they are the ones that are willing to self-confront, then I feel like if you adhere to those 5 things, then I often say that, okay, you're going to have your baseline so high. And I almost feel like I'm going to give away a secret here, but I would say,
give it away.
All right. Here we go. It's exclusive on Dan's podcast. I would say raise your baseline so high that person, because sometimes you want to feel like, oh, if I'm this person, now my spouse is going to say, oh my gosh, like I don't want to lose that person. But in reality, no, you become that person, and you realize, hey, I don't deserve this treatment in a relationship.
You earn your own self-respect. That's what it is.
That's good. That's really, let's pretend I said that. And then, Dan, you earn your own self-respect.
Got it.
So that was good. And I feel like that process, I feel like there's this whole concept, this process of unfolding or becoming. And I feel like that's so powerful, because, you go from, I didn't know what I didn't know, and now I know, but I'm having a hard time accessing the tools. And that is one of the, on this path of enlightenment, that's one of the most difficult places to be, because all of a sudden, sometimes I wish I didn't even know, I wish I wasn't even aware, but it's like, I didn't know. Now I'm aware, but I don't do the tools. And then eventually you're aware and you use the tools more than you don't. And then the final step of that is now you just become, you just are, you don't find yourself having to get down in the mud and wrestle with the pig, or, it's like, you recognize, oh man, I'm not jumping into that gaslighting model. Or now I can recognize what they're doing. Now that I'm standing my ground and sitting in my, healthy ego, they're pushing more buttons because they want me back into that enmeshment, because that's where they kind of got their supply. And
Yes. And that's where they're comfortable. Yeah.
exactly. Yeah. Yeah. So that's, I guess the answer is when somebody finds themselves in that situation, then it's, now you're on the path, and it's going to take a little bit, and it's going to take as long as it takes, and you're right where you are, and all those cliches, but they're true. And then when somebody falls back into those patterns of becoming emotionally immature or needy or clingy or trying to convince the other person, when they recognize it, because that's part of the human experience, maybe they're hungry, angry, lonely, tired, whatever that trigger is, that then just give yourself grace, recognize that it's all part of the process. Review. I always say with my men's group, review the game film. What am I pretending not to know? And then just keep moving forward. No shame, no beating yourself up. Like that's completely unproductive.
This has been great. I love this. I like how we're talking about self-confronting and how to deal with emotional immaturity, and even in the extreme form. I like your 5 steps.
And maybe real quick before we go, because I know I mentioned this concept of healthy ego a lot today.
Yes.
And that's something I'm passionate about. So what I mean by that is I do feel like, because I deal so much in this world of narcissism and emotional immaturity, that there comes a time where then people do start to feel more confident. I feel like we still have this fear of pride, that sort of thing. And so then, I found for a while, I would start saying, oh, I don't want to sound narcissistic. And then again, this author, Eleanor Greenberg, and I kind of adapted something that she does. She says, and I like this, she says, normal versus pathological narcissism. And she says, unfortunately, in the English language, the word narcissism has come to mean 2 entirely different things, depending on whether it's used formally as a diagnosis, as a narcissistic personality disorder, or informally as a synonym for positive self-regard. And she said, I'm often asked, isn't a little bit of narcissism healthy and normal? And I had this interview with Jennifer Finlayson-Fife, who, was my top guest of all time on my podcast. And we were talking about this, and it was funny because she was talking about, that everybody is a little narcissistic. And at that time, I didn't really understand what she was saying. And I thought, well, I'm not, that kind of thing. But I learned, I know she was coming from kind of maybe this place where this Eleanor Greenberg says, normal, healthy narcissism. And this is where I'm taking her words and I'm going to replace narcissism with ego, because I feel like narcissism has such this negative connotation.
Yes.
But normal, healthy ego is this realistic sense of positive self-regard that's based on a person's actual accomplishments. And it's relatively stable because the person is assimilated into their self-image, the success that came as a result of their actual hard work to overcome real life obstacles. And so because it's based on real achievements, normal, healthy ego is relatively impervious to the minor slights and setbacks that we experience as we go through life. Normal ego, healthy ego causes us to care about ourselves, do things that are in our self-interest, and is associated with self-respect. And she says somebody can think of it as something that's inside of you. And so that's where I feel like if you're the one listening to Dan's podcast and you're the one that's been doing the work and you're open to self-confrontation, then, when you feel confident about tools and skills that you're learning, then stand in that healthy ego and express yourself. And it's impervious to these slights. But then the thing to be aware of, and maybe I would call it my former self, is that pathological defensive narcissism. That's the defense against feelings of inferiority. So then the person dons this mask of superiority in an attempt to convince the world that they are special, but inside they feel insecure about their self-worth. And so then this facade of superiority is so thin. Eleanor Greenberg says it's like a helium balloon. So one small pinprick will deflate it. So this is what makes the person hypersensitive to minor slights that somebody with a healthy ego wouldn't notice. So instead, somebody with this type of defensive narcissism is easily wounded. They take any form of criticism, any disagreement as criticism, and then they lash out and devalue anybody that they think disagrees with them. So then they're constantly on guard trying to protect their status. So I feel like when you put those two, that's where I feel like, a lot of us maybe feel like, ooh, I know when I felt that, where, that how dare you vibe comes from the pathological defensive narcissistic self. But then the healthy ego is when one feels really differentiated. Now my wife can say, hey, I'm noticing this, or I kind of feel like this is what I'm seeing in the relationship. And from a healthy ego, I can with confidence say, thank you, because I want to be better. So I can self-confront, because from this healthy ego, I do feel confident about the things I know because I'm putting in the work. But that does mean that I can also be emotionally mature enough to then take a look at the things that I'm unaware of, because that might be an opportunity for growth.
Yeah, good. Oh, that's good because it takes a degree of willingness to commit to the truth, whatever it
Yeah.
might be, right? It's
Yeah.
like, I want
Yeah.
to know what's really going on, even if it puts me in a bad light or I feel uncomfortable about it. How can one strengthen their ability to sit with uncomfortable emotions? Because I think a lot of what you're saying kind of ties into that. Like
It does.
being, there's a new Imagine Dragons song. It's like, I'm okay with not being okay. Like,
Yeah.
it's
Well,
this humility, right?
it
Uh-huh.
is. And I feel like and it's funny when you're saying it that way, because I think it goes back to the concept that I was mentioned before, where we weren't even aware that we weren't aware. So then, now we're aware, but we're still just reacting impulsively. So stay on this path, and that awareness is key. And then it is being aware now of those moments where, okay, I did react impulsively. There's a book called The Masculine and the Relationship. This guy, G.S. Youngblood.
Yeah, it's been a guest on my podcast. Uh-huh.
Okay. Oh, I gotta find that. So I love, in that book, I had the summary of it where, I call it that holding the masculine frame. But when somebody's poking at you and then you're sitting with that discomfort, he says, okay, don't be a victim. And in that scenario, he says, no, your spouse is testing you. But I feel like, no, that anyone is testing you, and they're testing the relationship for safety. And then that third thing is he talks about putting connection ahead of fear or ego. And I love that concept, because I feel like that connection is the time for me to ground myself and be aware that I'm going to ground myself and be there for connection, and not let fear that this person might leave me, or ego that they may say something that hurts my feelings, connection ahead of fear or ego. And then the fourth thing this has been one of the most difficult things for me is, show your love. Don't try to explain it. And by showing, I feel like that's part of that process of becoming, is I know if I'm coming from my healthy ego that I am working on things. I know that I've become a better person. And so now if my spouse is saying, well, I don't buy it, I can understand. I can understand that would be hard if she doesn't buy it, because the reality is, I wasn't that person, the person I am now. And so then she is testing that relationship for safety, and I'm not going to be a victim, and I'm going to put that connection ahead of fear or ego, and I'm going to hold that frame because I have this healthy ego. And so that's where I feel like now I can sit with that discomfort, when I have those tools. And that's where, I'm a big old mindfulness fan, which I never thought it would be years ago. I mean, I had one client bring me a headband with a ponytail, so that I could, because sometimes you have to have that, that daily mindfulness practice to bring yourself back into this present moment. And when somebody is like attacking you, it may feel like an attack, to be aware that I am noticing that I am feeling defensive. I am noticing that this person is saying that I'm a complete buffoon. And I can see that, and I appreciate that. And I'm grateful that I am in this, moment with this person. And, boy, you really have to be intentional about that mindfulness. And then back to that implicit memory thing over time. And unfortunately, it takes longer than we think. What it feels like to be you becomes somebody that can sit with discomfort and notice my feelings and emotions and still remain connected, because I'm coming from this place of a healthy ego, because I'm willing to self-confront. It's a beautiful thing. But then still I'm saying this like, Dan, I've got it all figured out. And over the weekend,
of course you do.
One of my relatives said something silly, and then I reacted, and then that's the times I love when my wife would be like, oh, how'd that go, Mr. Expert? Right. And I'll be like, not so good, but then I will not beat myself up, give myself grace, review the game film. What am I pretending not to know? And then keep on moving.
Gotcha. Good. That's so good. If people want to learn more about you and your work, what's the best place for them to go find you?
Yeah. So go, you can just go to tonyoverbay.com, and I've got the Virtual Couch podcast, the Waking Up to Narcissism podcast. I really feel like there's a lot of good there. But it just, I know the word narcissism can sound so dramatic, but it really breaks down a lot about more around emotional immaturity. And I've got a book that was on the Amazon bestseller list for a little while. It's called He's a Porn Addict, Now What? An Expert and a Former Addict Answer Your Questions. And so I've gotten together with the co-author of that, and we're about to launch a podcast where we go through and we take the questions and answers from the book, and then we kind of go into more depth and detail on the kind of the behind the scenes. And then I've got a marriage course that I really feel confident about, that put together with a friend, Preston Pugmire, and it's called the Magnetic Marriage Course. And that's where we go into detail on these 4 pillars of a connected conversation. I feel like this whole model of self-confrontation and differentiation and standing in your healthy ego are so important. But I really still feel like there's a framework that is helpful to then be able to communicate as well. Because my personal opinion is I love all the stuff about only look at what you can look at and self-confrontation. But I still feel like there needs to be a tool to communicate with your spouse. Because I sometimes feel like people almost go all or nothing on, I'm going to work on me. And then, it's up to her to do her own work. And while that is true, I still feel like there needs to be a vehicle to be able to communicate. And I feel like the 4 pillars really address that.
Gotcha.
So you can find more there too on my website.
And you also have a private podcast too.
Yeah, the Magnetic Marriage podcast is about to launch as well.
Great. Thank you. This has been fantastic.
We hope that you enjoyed this episode of Get Your Marriage On. And if you did, we would love it if you would take a few seconds to give us a rating on iTunes and to share the show with your friends. They'll thank you for life. Once you've done that, you can head over to getyourmarriageon.com for more resources about today's topic and to download our amazing marriage apps. Now go get your marriage on.